Okay, happy Friday, everybody. We've had quite a week of weather for North America. Some really interesting pattern evolutions over the last 2 weeks, and it's just been really impressive seeing some of these numbers. We had gotten Chicago below zero last weekend, and now we're looking at some of the coldest Texas weather we've seen in decades for mid to late February. So just some really impressive pattern evolutions, and playing the forecast contest here, it's been really an interesting challenge in the 16 to 20 day space, because you started to see some of these signals starting to show up about 2 weeks ago, 2 to 3 weeks ago. And I was a little too slow initially. And then, no, I'm sorry, I was too fast initially. One of my first forecasts went a little too cold too quickly. And then I went too slow on it once we got into it. So it's been really interesting trying to catch that falling knife of this pattern. Has been quite a game. I had a moment. I want to say it was 2 Fridays ago. Today's the 12th. Yeah. So it was the last Friday of January. I had a kind of a eureka moment. When you're a meteorologist, I always love that moment when you're like, wait a minute, that's why this is happening. This is that eureka moment. It's like, and what really hit me was 2 Fridays ago. And I wrote a big article about it, was I noticed something strange was happening. We're starting to see signs of, the blocking getting a little bit more responsive, and the global wind, the AAM, was starting to really take off. It was starting to really rise, and then it was flying in the face of the fact that we had this moderate La Nina out there in the tropical Pacific. So I started looking through the data for cases in February when you had an atmospheric response that was not reflective of the La Nina. So usually when you have a high global wind, you've got very fast global momentum, and it's very El Nino oriented. So if you overlay an El Nino atmospheric response with a La Nina base state, you get a cold pattern. You don't get your classic southeast ridge. You don't get the more western focused, west and north focused classic La Nina look. You actually get a colder pattern across the central and eastern U.S. as well. So that was really surprised me. And the last time it happened was 3 years ago in 2018, was the last weak La Nina that we had. And sure enough, for about 2 weeks in late January and early February, up to about February 13th, we had a positive global wind with a weak La Nina base state. And we had 2 weeks of cold weather over the US. The difference this time was that the global wind was going much higher and staying positive much longer. And also, unlike 2018, we had a massive stratospheric warming event. All those articles we saw back in January about the polar vortex splitting. So this big, massive stratospheric warming event back in early January and the splitting of the PV has set up some decent negative AO and negative NAO setups there. And combine that with the fact that La Nina has taken a time out, taken a break here, just open the floodgates, let everything come through. This week, the Arctic oscillation, let me see if I can confirm this, but I think it got down to -5 or lower this week on the daily values. And the last time it got down that low in the month of February was 11 years ago in 2010. So it's been a really long time since we've seen blocking this powerful. Our reanalysis estimate got down to -5.3 on yesterday on the 11th. So these are some really incredible numbers that we're getting from like the Arctic oscillation, the NAO being negative. We had a pretty decent block over or blocking over the Alaska side, and so it really set up this really powerful Arctic outbreak that's now, as we're talking, it's racing toward Texas for a big hit early next week. So I guess at this point, the other folks on the call and everything just want to talk about at what you saw that set up this pattern that we're seeing now. I know David said to me that he was going, was it not this week but last week, you were going colder than me in the 16 to 20 days, so you were getting out ahead of me on this, and it's looking pretty good. But what were you seeing that helped drive you that way?
Oh, well, yeah, I think we were jokingly talking about
Going
why weren't you the member of the 150 plus club or something? But
Yeah, how big was that club? Was it a pretty big club then eventually, or I never saw what the forecasts were.
here, let's share the screen here.
Oh, there's your AO there. Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, we had the right. You were talking about the AO,
Yeah.
and I can't wait to ask you. I know you teased a lot of good stuff there. Now it's going to ask you too about is this the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end kind of thing? But I guess we can get to that in a second.
Yep.
But I guess looking back here, I'll just show if you want, I can show you the forecast verifications from the most recent week, and that would be, let's see, what do we have? It's the week before this, right? Yeah, so this is our most recent verifications. It's a couple days old now. Today's
Hmm.
the 12th, and we had the 7th. What did this verify? Whoops, sorry.
154.
Yeah, it verified 154, and let's see. Sorry, I'm schizophrenic here.
Yeah, there it is. You were 150 and I was
Oh,
141.
maybe
Yep.
that was it. But
That's
it's
great.
funny. It's funny though. I did not, from a performance
You had a
standpoint, I
pure
didn't do that well.
spread.
Right, my spread was
Yep.
interesting
Hmm.
how this does it. But
Hmm.
I put, let's see, what did I say here? I'm just going with your question. Oh, okay. I'm glad we put these notes in because now I remember this forecast. I said
Yeah.
my forecast formula is very similar to last time. Despite the warmer changes from the past week, I feel like I've seen this show before and that we will likely be more volatility with a skew to the cold side. So I remember this actually.
Uh-huh.
This might have been actually, I'm not sure if this was the week we were talking or another week, but
Might have been the other week.
there was a
Yeah.
couple 150 plus. But I remember this. There was a point where this was looking really bad.
Hmm.
For the couple days before this forecast was made on January 19th, which seems ages ago. And I think for the few days up until that forecast, the forecast had been shifting warmer. And it had looked like we weren't going to see as much cold. And
Yep.
this was after the stratospheric warming. And
Hmm.
I think, I'm not as in touch with the market as you are. I mean, you're out there, all day long, hearing things and seeing the ups and downs. But from what I recall, talking to Dave Darkangelo and some of the folks then was, we had the strat warming
Hmm.
2 to 3 weeks before that. And there was a certain expectation in the market that by this point, we would have started to see more of a response in the guidance and stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we weren't really seeing that. And there
Hmm.
was some concern that we wouldn't see it, that this, if you want to call it the strat warming, was going to fail, whatever. And I just remember at the time thinking to myself, for what it's, and, yeah, flip of a coin maybe, but that, what I said there, I felt like just because we were seeing some warmer changes in
Uh-huh.
days, that the strat warming historically, all the research I had seen is that it is really like a 30 to 60-day signal. It's not
It
like,
really is. Yeah.
so
Hmm.
anyway, that was my long-winded 2 cents, but
No,
go.
no, you're right about that. I mean, I think that's really, and it's taken me a long time to come to this too. Because I've been biased by the 09, 10, 10, 11 winters when we had so many immediate responses to the stratospheric warming because there were just so many stratospheric warmings in those two winters that it biased me to that whole thing. But since then, we have seen what you just said, a more classic 30 to 60-day response. A great match to the early January event was 2013. And 2013 was a warm January. We got cold in February and we stayed cold for March as well. Another one happened just 3 years ago in early 2019, and that one technically did give us an officially colder than normal Feb. It wasn't as impressive as this one, but it was technically a colder than normal Feb and March as well. Another great example of recent times was the Feb 20th SSW in 2018, which ended up giving us a very cold March, and April was the coldest April in 35 years. It really shocked the energy markets because they thought they knew what the storage was going to be going into the summer for the reload,
Yeah.
and they were way off. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's 36 days. You're absolutely right. And I guess it's really hard being in the trenches every day, looking at these models and remembering that, because you see these ups and downs, you see, like you were saying, the warmer changes, and you start to, especially when you're in the trenches every single day, you start to, disbelieve that it's actually going to pan out. But I had seen some research over the summer, I think it was, when I had Dr. Lang do a talk, but I had done some other research on that too with the stratospheric warming stuff. And there was something about, usually with SSWs, they tend to affect Europe and Asia first, and North America tends to be at the lagging part of the whole relationship. So, and we did see that back in January. We saw snow in Spain, the Madrid snow event. We had Beijing down to 0 or sub-zero conditions and stuff like that. They had gotten really cold in the early and middle part of January, and then it seems like the baton has been passed a bit more to our side of the hemisphere now. So it's been very fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, Or the other folks on the call here, did they do forecast during this week too? Michael and Anthony?
I think I missed this week.
Oh, okay.
You picked a good week to miss.
Yeah, it was a tough one.
Do you have any thoughts on it, Michael?
Lands, it was warmer.
I probably wouldn't have been much. I probably would have been around 144, 145 ish. Just from my formula. Taking the EC and the 10-year and kind of blending those together, I would have been in that general vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly have been getting kind of the forecasts I have been making have been on the colder side because I heavily weight the teleconnections, and the NAO and AO have been quite negative since like December, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, so it's I've been kind of toning back the amount of cold for most of the forecasts I from this, because normally this would be a pretty cold signal, but it hasn't up until just recently, when I started I think 2 weeks ago the verifications started coming in colder, and I think I might be a little off on the time frame, but I started increasing my values a little bit around then, and I might have increased it here, but that might also be just me playing Monday morning quarterback.
It's interesting because I think my 10-year average it might be colder than what you have here for your 10-year, because I think we have 10 to 19 in the data that I work with. So I think that may have skewed me thinking that I was being more aggressive when I really wasn't being aggressive. So because 2019 was a colder than normal February from a national degree day standpoint. So interesting. But we did lose 9. Oh yeah, 9 was warmer, I think. But Dave, go back to that AO chart though that you had, if you still have it on as an option there. Look at the 7-day, 10-day, and 15-day verifications down there. I mean, I just, one of the reasons I've been kind of on this train that we're not done yet, this isn't the end, is just that the models have not been handling the blocking well at all. They've been really bad over Alaska. They've been bad over Greenland. If you take the 11-15 day from 2 weeks ago and look at the verifications, they just really missed the blocking intensity. And I really do feel like we're not quite done yet. I've never, the steepness of this incline, there were a few tweets about it this week. They think it's related to the fact that the GLAM is falling now. The negative AM influences are being propagated up toward the polar latitudes and starting to weaken and erode the blocks. They're starting to the La Nina is starting to wake up again. But the GLAM, the global wind's not falling fast enough for what I can tell. I mean, it's still 0.5 to 1.5, and I ran those numbers, and I still get blocking mechanisms support for that. And then this 30 to 60 day concept as well. I mean, this is the actual stratospheric warming event. The big one occurred in early January, so we're only still inside the. Yeah, and I guess it was a secondary split sometime mid to late January as well. Some folks have reported about that. So I still feel like we're pretty deep into this. We've got some time to go yet. Another month or so is what I was thinking. So I'm kind of skeptical. I think the AO is going to find its way back down again. There was a time in mid to late January where the models were suggesting the AO was going to go higher as well, and they were wrong about that, and it ended up being more negative again. So yeah, I don't know if that's the same. I guess that might be it, from the GFS standpoint, but the European I thought was even going positive too. But yeah, so the GLAM INSO connection is one of the reasons why I think we're going to still see some more cold going into March. The 30 to 60 day ideas following stratospheric warmings and the bias of the blocking is another reason. And I had a third. Oh, I know. The third reason was the MJO stuff. It's been really interesting in the MJO front. The other thing that I think really set the stage up for the colder end of setup at the end of Jan into early February was that spike in the phases 6 and 7. When I did the phase 6 and 7 history in late January with particularly 7, with a rising AM state, the base state, and then also a negative INSO, I got a lot of support for a cold pattern. So it really generate that. And so now the European is suggesting we're going to collapse out of that signal out of the Western Pacific and become more of a more forcing toward the maritime continent toward phase 5. And the 30-day bias corrective says no to that. Is actually going to curve back and be more in the Western Pacific again. So there's some big debate on the MJO front, but I was going with the bias corrected version, which suggested it would go back toward the Westpac 6 and 7. And if you look at 6 and 7, late February and early March, particularly 6, I think is when I was looking at curving back through there, I was getting a colder signal. Now this is a nice lag thing that you guys have. Does it show it on here though? That's the big question. So you have to go. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's interesting that phase 5 isn't as warm as I would have guessed it to be. So you would really need it. You need it to be back down in the Indian Ocean to be a really warm signal, right? Is that I'm reading that correctly? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really not. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I still think there's more cold to this pattern yet to come. It's going to be interesting to see how this evolves. But those were kind of the 3 reasons: the global wind, the blocking underestimation, and then the MJO progression or lack thereof. So yeah, it'll be interesting to watch how this evolves.
Hey, Matt, can I? Oh,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to echo, I think one of the points you brought up, which was, and to Michael's point earlier, this is a little bit of Monday morning quarterback, but going to the forecast that you were just talking about the week after, sorry, I got lost here. So not this one. Okay, the next one. Let me go one forward. So I think this was the one, right? This was the one where our MJO analog was really one of the strongest signals I had seen. It was 152 versus normal, which was 142. So it was, it was a decent deviation from normal for this statistical tool. And this was, I think, exactly that point. January 26th was the forecast. Going back here, where this thing was, it was forecast to really climb northward. And I a lot of times in these meetings, we talk about good research projects. To me, this is a classic example. If one of the students or something like that, experientially, I agree with you 100%. It sounds like you've already done some of this research, but seeing an MJO projected with a relatively high degree of confidence to go go very high amplitude into phase 6, 7, to me is a red flag, or just that, hey, don't go warm. Do the forecast cold. If things are going to break significantly, if you're going to tell me that there's going to be a 30 HDD bust one way or the other, all my alarm bells say go cold, go cold, go cold. And I think that's what I was thinking on this forecast, if I remember why I put in the...
You did good. You're going to do well on this one. Wow.
Yeah, I think... I'm putting more emphasis on the MJO signal in this forecast based on the current conditions and projected evolution in the next couple of weeks. So I mean, I think what you're saying is exactly right. But I would love, so that aside, I would love to see that research a little bit more, because I absolutely do think that there's probably a model bias there, systematic model bias, and not being able to resolve the linear or nonlinear impacts that occur after the MJO kind of moves into that scenario.
Yeah, that was the strongest MJO signal we had seen all winter. The MJO has been so weak this winter. It's not been very. It's been split. Forcing's been split on the Hoffmanners all over the place. So it's been hard to read. And so it was. My problem I was having at the end of January was the composites that we had, and I think yours are different, and I think maybe they look better in terms of your lag response there, and I think that's nice. And but in late January when I was looking at this, I was getting one phase was warm and one phase was cold, 6 and 7, but you're getting a lagged response there that 6 and 7 both lean cold. So that was good. That actually worked out better, I think, because I was getting historical matches that were giving me a warmer phase 6 and a colder phase 7. I was filtering by the positive glam. I think that Eureka moment I had 2 Fridays ago was just don't just do positive glam, but also do negative inso. And then that kind of filter everything out nice and cleanly for me to be cold. And maybe all the cases that you have here are doing that too. But yeah, sometimes you can get yourself over detailed and then you start going down a rabbit hole, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, my sample size is way too small. I can't put a lot of emphasis on this. So
Well, and I also think, again, in fairness, like I think my job is easier in some respects in the sense that, again, just from the conversations I had with some of the market folks like you and, well, at the time it was, Dave Darkangelo,
Dave,
a couple
yeah.
others. Yeah, I got the feeling that after that stratospheric warming and the models not,
Hmm.
I remember Dave talking about this. He's like, we've seen the models try to produce cold so many times over the last few years, and most of the time, this was his words. It just seemed to fail or kind
Yes.
of underwhelm.
Oh, the
And
traders think that all the time.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and I think coming into this event, I think there was a little bit of deja vu. This is going to
Yep.
happen all over
Mhm.
again.
Yep.
I don't do as much real time work right now, so like for me, I didn't. I was like, yeah, I'm not feeling that. Like I'm
Mhm.
like, hey, this looks good, whatever. And
Yeah.
it was no, but it was
Yep.
interesting. Because I tried to think of myself. I've been there. I know exactly that feeling where it's like
Yep.
maybe you've been burned a couple times. Yeah, you thought it was going to be cold. It didn't come
Yep.
in. And then you
Yep.
tend to go very conservative, even if you see new signals. And so I just think there's an interesting psychology to
Oh, there's a
that
super
too. Yeah.
interesting psychology.
Yeah.
No doubt. You're absolutely 100% right about that.
Yeah.
Um, even late last week and early this week, I was still getting traders asking me, well, how is this going to fail this time? They really wanted me to figure out and pinpoint how this one was going to fail so they can understand when they could, adjust for it or whatever. So they were just, the market was really, really short. It was, they did not, there was a lot of skepticism on this one. And like I say, even earlier this week, I was getting some traders saying, well, when's this plug going to get pulled on this thing? It's getting kind of dangerously close. But we've been colder than a 30-year normal now for the U.S. on the gas weighted perspective since last Saturday. So even though we're not at the peak of it yet, which is going to be early next week on the holiday, it's been colder than a 30-year normal now for almost a week. So really, really impressive stuff. But now we couldn't string any of these days. We couldn't get a string of this going at all last winter, and anything prior to this winter too, except for that one period in late October. So it's been a long time since we've had and even the 2019 February event pales in comparison to the intensity that we're getting right now. So yeah, it's a problem, like you're saying, psychologically, because it's been so long since we've been in a state like this. So it does mess with everyone's minds. So yeah.
Hey, Matt, can I ask you one other research question
Yeah.
that you might have some insight on? I was just thinking about what you were saying about some of the snow and ice, and I was thinking about the fact that, I'm here in New Jersey, and so is Michael, and we've got still a lot of snow on the ground, maybe some more coming. And so two questions with this. One, I haven't looked at it, like from a national perspective, like where are we, basis normal? And assuming I would guess we're above normal, but assuming we are, like, do you think at this point, I know in the past the models, the perception was that the models sometimes would not resolve that well. Like if you were in a situation where there was a lot of snowpack, that not only could it have a local impact, i.e., hey, New York City's temperature is going to be coming colder that night, but that it could have a more regional impact in sort of mitigating some warm risk and stuff. Do you have any thoughts on those subjects?
Yeah, definitely. That's been a huge issue. The European model has really struggled with the snow bias problem, and they claim their upgrades are going to try to address that and improve that situation. But they have had a really bad snow bias, and you see it in the data. A week after a big snow event, it's still got a cold reflection, like over Iowa or some area that had a big snow event. And you really have to, as forecasters, we really have to try to fade that out a lot faster than what the models are doing. So yeah, the European has a really bad bias with that. We were debating that a lot this week, actually, because I think one of the problems with the Texas forecast early next week is that Dallas is going to get 3 to 6 inches of snow. And so that cold Tuesday morning that's being forecast, the coldest day they've seen in February in decades, is dependent on having snow on the ground, and how much of that is going to be a model error and how much of that's really going to happen. And you got to take that into account. So the GFS operational has a bad snow bias, and it was going sub-zero for Dallas on Tuesday morning. Now we all know snow does do that. If you have snowpack, it does, radiational cooling is very effective, and the spine of the Arctic high is going to go across Texas on Tuesday morning. So it could be optimized. You're going to have calm winds, you're going to have clearing skies, and you're going to have the snow cover albedo effect. So it really could make a huge difference. It's surprise. But what we have found in our bias data is that more often than not, the models overdo the snow cover feedback. They go too strong with it, and they like you were saying, they linger it too long too. There's something to be said about fresh snow cover being much more effective than dirty snow, because you don't get that white response, that impact as well later in the game, as it's not as effective. So yeah, that's been a huge issue. That's been a huge problem, and it's going to be really telling early next week to see how much of the forecasts were inclusive of that problem. So yeah, it's been a challenge, and we've all been fighting it. And from a vendor standpoint, all the different vendors have been trying to make their own estimates about how much of the model do you want to believe, given that understanding of the snow cover feedback bias. So the proof will be in the pudding next week. We'll get a lot of information, because it's been a long time since we actually had snowpack in Dallas. I mentioned this earlier in an article, but we've had problems in Texas in the summer where the models tend to overstate the first heat wave of the summer. They tend to go way above 100 in Dallas, and it doesn't verify. So their surface response to dry soil is pretty intense as well. And so I'm hoping that the models are not as bad on the snow cover as they are with the soil moisture, but it may get us again here. But again, like I say, we were trying to be conservative. I think our forecasts haven't been as cold as a lot of the models have been on that issue. But yeah, you also mentioned regional too. Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen that a little bit. I mean, this afternoon's European ensemble came in just before this call, and they're adding another, they've been trending this way, but they're adding another snow event for Dallas next Wednesday, another 3 to 6 inches on top of the 3 to 6 inches they may get on Monday, which is just phenomenal. But if they were to have that much snow in the ground mid to late next week, they were cooling down. The European ensemble was cooling down Texas, and then extending into the Tennessee Valley as well. So it was pretty crazy. If you want me to, I could show my screen on that. Let me see if I can cue that up here real quick.
Yeah, that'd be great. I was just going to try to pull up the snow, and
I've got to get my right browser on my right screen, because I've got this massive monitor that doesn't look good for sharing screens. So hang on one second here.
Sure.
All right, and then let's see.
And do you know where we are from a national perspective?
Yeah, I can pull it up too.
Okay.
I was trying to get to that as well. We have a chat system on our thing here. Yeah, you can go ahead and shift to me.
Okay, you should be able to.
I got to find it. Hang on one second. Yep,
Okay.
sure, I can do it. Let's see, screen one. There we go. I've got the guy from the Christmas Story there up front.
Yeah, there you go.
Texas. They're going to be bundling up. So we have a current data snow cover thing. You were asking about snow cover, and I think we get this from NOAA. And in fact, I'm pretty sure we do. And then here's North America. So the snow cover anomaly as of yesterday looks like this. So it was above normal snow cover across the southern periphery there, from Kansas, Missouri over to you guys. Basically, we have nothing here in Delaware, but here's the chart. So you can see it's quite a bit above last year. And the 10-year mean, it's above the 10-year mean, is that blue line is where we're at now. And so yeah, it's pretty robust right at this moment. We also have some snow depth maps, but give you an idea where see, this is where some of the models seem to overdo it a little bit, where they tend to respond to that, I think, a little bit more. But yeah, so I'll show you the European ensemble that came in this afternoon, just to give you an idea of what I was talking about. They the change maps on surface temperatures. Let's get over here. So it was another snow event setting up for the middle of next week. And then all of a sudden, so it was like Wednesday, they were getting another snow event in Texas, Dallas especially. And then see all this response starting to show up with these changes. And so these colder changes just kept going and they kept lingering right over that area.
Yeah.
And I'll show you that as well. Now, I guess the European operational extended it more in the Tennessee Valley than this, but this feedback goes into the late 6 to 10 day period as well, and just kind of lingers down there, the warming going over the top. But I really do think a lot of that snow cover, unfortunately, the snow output from these models is not very good, and we have to do our own, and that's not very good either because we don't factor in all like the 850 and stuff like we need to do. So it does cause problems. I'm gonna, you see that we call them, a lot of people in the industry call them clown maps, because even like, Pivot or some of the other weather bells and stuff like that, they have these aggressive looking snow maps because they don't, it just, for example, it's missing some of the freezing rain and sleet that's going to happen as well. It's going to lower your totals. But they're getting this event on Monday, and that's not going to happen in Houston. It's going to be a lot of sleet and freezing rain there. But then they get this other event coming in on Wednesday as well, right in that area too. And that's where most of the colder changes were showing up on the model this afternoon. So yeah, you just have to take that into account. It really does complicate the forecast, getting the snow aspect there. Maybe it's cleaner on the 24-hour one.
That's still stunning, though. I mean, how do you think?
That's more realistic. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, do you think? Can you go back to Houston for
the first event?
Yeah, and I know you said that this is not going to verify. What is that? The 4 to 6 inches?
Yeah.
I can't imagine Houston with 4 to 6 inches. But do you think they might get like how, any idea, like in terms of total sleet, ice, and snow? I mean, are we talking like an inch or?
Yeah, it looks really bad. So the GFS 12Z, they added precip type to the GFS in one of the recent iterations, and it's not that bad actually. It's the best thing we have. We're the NAM 18Z is coming in. So let's check that real quick. That one might give us a little bit more on this. We're getting closer to the event here.
Yeah.
So, wow. Yeah, look at that. So all of that red area is freezing. Actually, it's sleet. It's a lot of sleet. The freezing rain is this narrow purple that's hard to see right along the coast there, but that's more into Houston. So, but there's a large area of sleet as well. And they were talking about the idea that maybe that would, the air mass is just so cold that it will be more sleet than freezing rain. So they won't have the outages issues and stuff, because that could be some significant demand destruction if they get a lot of freezing rain down there, because they're just not used to that, and they're just going to see a lot of power outages. The cold to getting down in the teens too. Apparently, a lot of them have their plumbing in the attics there because of the floodplain issues. So, but that works against them when they get a big cold outbreak like this. They're going to have a lot of pipes bursting up in their attics and stuff. Yeah, people are wrapping their pipes and everything. But let me go. Let me go back to the 12Z and pull up the GFS real quick just to give you a better idea of that day. I think that'll, I guess I have to go back to the back to get to the GFS. I've got too many menus.
Yeah, a lot of menus.
I'm going to go the way I normally go. So this is like hour by hour, but you can see the event here. I mean, let me add the cities into this. So you can see Dallas, DFW, Houston, IAH. And so you can see the event playing out Monday. It looks like it's going to be more Monday morning. Houston's in the rain, freezing rain area though. So that is definitely concerning there on Monday morning. Looks like it could be the worst. And if the cold air gets in, it'll convert over to sleet. And the snow will stay well north and west toward College Station, up toward the border there with Louisiana. So yeah, it's going to be That's going to be a tough one. The local National Weather Service is going to really have a really tough time with this winter storm. They're going to probably some serious winter storm warnings out for them. But yeah, pretty impressive event. Now the next event after that is just mostly a Dallas issue there, and although there's a little bit of freezing rain getting in there on Wednesday morning too. Yeah, that's interesting. Then it goes to rain after that. They warm up enough. It's more Dallas snow at that one. It's going to be interesting. We've never had, as I mentioned it to a trader earlier, we've never had so much cold and frozen precipitation in Texas with this much wind generation out there. So this gives you an idea where all the wind turbines are located. And
that's great.
You can see the overlays here. And they've been getting freezing drizzle out there the last few days. And that's really, if you get freezing drizzle on the turbines, it slows them down. They can't operate as well. So they're getting a little bit of patchy freezing drizzle into some wind farms, affecting things. But once we get the snow going, that's not usually a problem for them. But the big problem for them is the temperatures. If they get in the low single digits, sometimes they get shutoffs of the wind generation. They can't run under certain temperatures, not winterized for that. And David, I know as you remember, there's also shale gas production out here too, and so they get down in the single digits or teens. That you get wellhead freeze-offs, and that's also another problem for energy folks as well. So there's just so many moving parts to this forecast. This is a very, very challenging dynamic for next week. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. I was mentioning the GLAM earlier, so I would just show you.
Yes.
A client just pinged me on that. The trend is lower. So this peak that we had, this anti-La Nina base state, is fading. So there is some argument, and I saw a tweet or two this past week saying that this falling GLAM is why the AO is collapsing, and going positive, and why we're losing our blocks and everything. But I had looked at 0.5 to 1.5 range, this new range that it's moving into, and it still gave me that contrarian result. It's like not a classic La Nina look as much. If you have a weak to moderate La Nina and a positive GLAM and 0.5 to 1.5 range. So it's interesting. We'll have to see how this plays out. The other problem I have with this whole forecast thing too, and maybe it'll be different on the downside, but if I take this and go back 2 weeks to the end of January, for example, and look at these verifications, the models were showing the GLAM spiking, but I'm going to take out last year because it keeps messing my chart up, but they never were high enough. They could never get high enough with the forecast. So there was always a negative bias to the GLAM. And I had gone back pretty far and seen that as well, back to, I think, mid-January here. Let's see if I still see it. It wasn't as bad back then, I guess. It was negative. Let's go to January 15th. We have a default to show last year. It was a big issue last summer because of the response. But here's a good example. January 15th, 2021. These were all the models were down here, and they missed that peak there. And this is around the time when the models were looking warmer. It wasn't looking like there was going to be much of a response to the blocking and things like that. So we really weren't picking up on the signal that it would have been a huge issue here. GLAM is very difficult to forecast. It requires multiple levels, and the models don't even have all the levels required, particularly the European, to calculate it. So it has always been a challenge. We do bias corrections and stuff to it to try to fix that, but it's still a tremendous challenge. So we'll have to see how this goes.
Hey, Matt, do you have the time series going back to like December?
Let me look.
And while you're trying to load it, I'll tell you the reason I'm asking. I'm just curious, you brought up sort of a relationship there, a potential relationship with the GLAM and the Arctic oscillation.
Yeah.
And we know, of course, the Arctic oscillation, as Michael, I think, brought up, it's been largely negative since December.
It has.
So I'm curious what that relationship has been since December with the GLAM.
Yeah, I could do it the other way. I don't have to look at our forecast. I could just do show history as well. So yes, so the GLAM in December was mostly negative, mostly a La Nina base state, and then it went really negative in early January. So I feel like that was a inhibiting factor for working against the blocking response over North America. We were still getting more of a classic La Nina look and more of a warm response. And then, so once that pivoted and that went away from the La Nina base state, I think that sort of changed the equation, allowed the blocking to be more effective in our world, in North America, part of the Northern Hemisphere. But that's my theory anyway. It's we're all still learning. So look at that. That was a pretty tremendous dive and then spike here. And, the pattern really flipped late Jan, early Feb. That's when the pattern flip occurred. So, and now the models are warming up the 11 to 15 day as we're starting to see this thing tail off a little bit.
But it's interesting though too. Like, so the AO was this. So this is more observation, right? So you have like back in December, and we know the AO was generally on a negative track, right? From and yet, so I
That's
guess
similar to your chart, that you showed.
Yeah. And so, can you go back to the other one real quick too, then?
Yeah.
And then I guess and maybe I'm just being cynical or skeptical. And but I guess what's leading what here?
I know. Yeah, that's a good point.
Like the AO, it seems like was going negative from mid-December, and it was going negative even when the AAM was going negative, and it continued to go negative when the AAM went positive. And so I guess when I hear things like, well, hey, the AAM's going back negative again, so the AO should respond in a certain way. Should we think of it that way, or what's leading?
Not as much for Europe or Asia, but for the US, for whatever reason, we're very sensitive to INSO. So we, I've over the last several years, I've monitored this GLAM quite a bit, and it's a really good bellwether for North American weather. So it's really the INSO response to North America is very influenced by this. So I felt like I really needed to get the La Nina to shut down to allow the blocking. Like you said, the blocking was there all along. The AO was always negative. Even before the stratospheric warming, it was negative, right? But to make it more effective for North America, I felt like you had to shut down the INSO component. But you make an interesting point, because it was something really interesting happened in the 2010, 2011 winter that just, a lot of weather forecasters stumbled over it. It was a really interesting challenge, but the blocking had gotten so strong in January 2011 that the MJO couldn't even, the forcing streams coming out of the tropics or whatever couldn't even break through, and the blocking overwhelmed everything. So in some ways, maybe the blocking slowed down the global wind and the MJO forcing. So like you said, who's leading who? Maybe it was the response from that negative. I mean, the AO got to -5, let's see, this is I'm back on A. That's funny, it says AO up here. But the AO got to -5 this week. So you're, like you said, who's leading who? Maybe the super block that we're in now is what caused the global wind to slow to speed up or whatever, to create that gradient to speed up the global wind and not give us that classic La Nina response. -5.3 there, pretty impressive. So maybe the AO had to get below a critical level to become. That's always the rule with Arctic oscillation, is that the more negative it is, the more areas of the northern hemisphere are affected by in the mid latitudes. So a weaker negative AO may affect one segment, but a super negative AO, super blocking sort of situation, can affect Europe, Asia, and North America simultaneously, like we saw in the 09-10 and parts of the 10-11 winter.
Yeah, I think those are all a lot of interesting points there. I think you're right. Like, and it's unfortunately it's not so simple. It's like you said, it could also be that. Well, one, it sounds like you're saying, even if there isn't a super strong connection necessarily with the AO and the GLAM, there's still this connection with the GLAM and the U.S. weather pattern, right? So, and it seems like that could be in part why we saw this big response in terms of temperature over the past few weeks. The Arctic oscillation had been negative for a long time, but the GLAM was, or the ENSO state was a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I also think I really like your point too about how this sort of nonlinear type thing, and Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I
Yes.
remember the 09, 10 and 10, 11 winters too, where it could also be that, that at some point the AO, the blocking could reach a critical threshold. And it
Yeah.
could be in terms of both structure and intensity. I don't know, but I suspect it's some relationship to both, where it has a much bigger impact feedback back onto the tropics and mid-latitude patterns.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think and that's, I guess, part of the $1 million question here over the next few
hmm
weeks. Is it at that critical threshold, and are the models maybe underestimating the amount of,
hmm
how much work it's going to take to
Yep.
really to weaken the blocking situation?
Yeah, yeah. That I don't know if you were. I was not there at this thing, but apparently it was November of 2010 or January of or December of 2010, and it was like Dr. Todd Crawford of WSI was giving a presentation, and David Gold and Jason Lin just tore into him, and they were just saying, "How can you think the blocking is going to win here?" Because they were showing all this tropical forcing that was just going to overwhelm and create this really warm January, and and the blocking won that battle. It was apparently an epic throwdown debate, and it just. I
Oh,
guess were you there? Were you remember? I wasn't
no,
there,
I
but
don't. I
I've
mean,
heard stories
I
about this one.
remember similar type with
Yeah.
similar people, like
Yep.
good debate. High, very
Yep. Yep.
animated debates. But
Yep.
actually, if we could see one other thing, would
Yeah.
you mind pulling up like a 11 to 15, I don't know, like a 2 meter temperature anomaly or 500 millibar height anomaly? I'm just curious explicitly where the models are right now. I looked at this
Yeah.
a little bit earlier.
Yeah. So it's interesting. They uh use my
But yeah, it's the age-old argument, is it the
yeah.
tropics, or is it you know, the the Arctic oscillation and the blocking?
Yeah, yeah, like you say, it's not always linear. So here's the 6 to 10 day forecast right now. They're still pretty cold
Yep.
because of that secondary storm in Texas and everything, and the cold migrating eastward. But then the big story in the last 24 hours is that the 11 to 15 days have been
Right.
moderating quite a bit. So here's the latest 11 to 15 day looks. You could see very warm forecast here. The vortex does not leave Canada, so you still have cold in Western Canada. Let me expand my view a little bit here. You could see more cold in central western Canada there, but yeah, the negative PNA is setting up, so you get a more moderation across the Midwest and East, and so it's a lot warmer look on these models right now. We have the new GFS parallel, which is going to be the new GFS operational on March 17th. It has been suggesting that maybe we would see another cold push setting up later in the 11-15 day, like it would pivot again back into the east, like we've been seeing recently. So and I think it was GFS Ensemble Legacy or some of the other ones were showing that too. But even the GFS operational is hinting about that a little bit here. And that's the 0Z cycle. Let's see. I think the 12Z cycle did that. No, not quite as much. The parallel didn't do as much either. It's more Western cold. So we haven't scoured out the cold air supply yet. So it's still on the board, I guess you could say. So I think it's something we need to keep watching.
And can we see the 500 millibar pattern real quick? And then
Yeah.
promise that's my last question.
No, it's fine.
Just curious.
So yeah, it's really interesting. I had been looking at this a lot. This is the European ensemble that just came in this afternoon,
Okay.
and what I discovered was if this negative NAO was stronger and the ridge extended over the Davis Strait in toward the edge of the Hudson Bay, then the orientation of this vortex would be such that it would rotate more cold air into the Midwest and
Yeah.
East. So this area here, if it got just a little bit redder, it actually is a colder signal. And if you go look at the bias corrected versions of this stuff, it is stronger in that area because they've been underestimating the negative NAO for the last several weeks. And then the other thing I noticed too is the pincer movement. If this was a little bit stronger right here too, it would nudge the vortex just a little further south, and all of a sudden you're back in the ball game again. So it's very delicate. It's not like if this thing were over the Gulf of Alaska, it'd be all over, game over, everything's done. But the fact that you still got this cold vortex sitting in Canada and the supply in central Western Canada really makes this a difficult game, I think.
And can we see that like the global view, or
Yeah,
either
let's
global
do
or
that.
hemispheric? And I was just gonna say, like I agree, like with my cold bias hat on, And there are, you know, there
Yeah.
I know we've been talking a lot about the reasons it could go colder, you know, but
You can
yeah,
still
you
see the split vortex here at
exactly.
500. Yep, you got
I
these
mean,
two in this one. Yep.
right, you know, looking at this as long as we have, you know,
Hmm.
if that vortex, I mean, maybe this is I look at this and um I completely agree 100% with what you're saying here. That the location of that vortex in Northwest Canada, that looks very unstable to me. And again, a lot of what I'm saying, it's a little bit more subjective and experiential. Would love to test this a little bit more. But going back to that map, Matt, you had up there,
Yeah.
that looks like a very unstable situation. Over the
Yep.
Peak,
Yep.
Alaska is very different. And so what I mean by that, so what does that mean from a practical standpoint? I think a split. A split is more likely. And what happens if it splits? If it splits, just like I think Matt you were alluding to, one of those pieces comes down and it could come into the northeast. I mean, you look at that. You know,
Yeah.
just again,
Yeah.
my cold bias hat on. If I could
Yeah.
annotate that, I would say, okay, now all of a sudden that ridge is going to be stronger into that Greenland ridge is stronger into eastern Canada, and then it forces the piece that piece in Western Canada is more of a split. So one of those very strong pockets of polar vortices splits into the northeast United States. Very cold air across the
Hmm.
northeast. There might be a gradient, it might be warm in Florida, but still much colder across the northeast. And if that split happens, what does that also mean for that ridge across the East Pacific? And some of this is a feedback on it. Well, there's probably, like you were saying, Matt, there's going to be more ridging or at least less troughing poking into Western Canada, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah. This
that's
whole
also
area
going to
here.
allow for more cold to suppress. So this to me looks like a very unstable situation, i.e., it's not going to verify as is.
Yep.
And
Yep. That's
yeah,
true.
and
Yep.
you know,
That
so
Kamchatka trough makes me nervous too. You used to get this digging, you get sort of a trough over this area here. You tend to fill in the heights. Usually, like you said, this is not going to verify, and usually the strongest areas have the best chance of verifying. So this here, this vortex, this maybe this trough here, but these white areas are going to fill in. That's going to be red probably in between these two, and this is going to be here the Scandinavian ridge extension into the negative AO space maybe again too. So yeah, it's going to
yeah.
be really interesting. Uh-huh. I wanted to see, I thought I had a 30-day bias corrected version of this. I
Oh
haven't looked
yeah.
at it in a long time, but here it is, 30-day bias corrected. So this is accounts for the errors of the past 30 days. And let's see what it shows us here. Same model, but accounting for, so see, look at that, the much stronger negative AO, and then that does cross the Davis Strait with the
Yep.
warm height anomalies. So, it does suggest that, suppress vortex a little bit more, and it could rotate some cold air into the more classic, maybe a little bit classic La Nina areas of the plains and Midwest there. So it'll be interesting. Definitely a
And
lot to
then
watch.
I think that MGO piece is like you said too. I think if I had to that one right. I mean, as we talked about like 3 weeks ago, it looked much more like a flashing red light.
Mm-hmm,
Now the
mm-hmm,
fact that yes, it is in phase 6-7, which classically is cold, but it
mm-hmm.
is expected to weaken, and
That's
that
the
does
thing.
that. Yeah, you're
Yep.
right because if you're playing the warm card here, I think you could say something like, and when you look at the actual convective pattern over the ocean, you could say, well, yes, there's still this piece over phase 7 over the SPCZ, but it's kind of becoming detached now.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer connected as well with the maybe extratropical pattern, and so that disconnect is going to allow the La Nina pattern to become more established,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., that the pattern that the models are showing that you just showed
Yep. Yep.
is going to verify. And if it
Mm-hmm.
does verify, it is going to try to amplify the ridge in the southeast United States and effectively, kind of block
Mm-hmm.
more cold from hitting
Access.
the
Yep.
area.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think that is this definitely does look a little bit different than 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
In my opinion, there's more.
Yeah.
I could see more angles on
Teetering.
both sides. Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It's very complicated. We do clustering where we um, look at um, different options that the model's presenting to us, broken out to by.
oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so
Do we
let's
see
see.
any clusters? I'm curious, showing what we just talked about.
Let's look. I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. Um, so this is the 11 to 15 day clusters here. So the lead, wow, it's a pretty big lead cluster. 62% of the members,
Interesting.
pretty good vortex
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
decent negative AO, but you see that southeast ridge is starting to return again.
Yeah.
And then let's see. Okay, so this one's the one, the 18% would be the one where it connects over the Bering Sea. So you have a negative WPO back again, and so it starts to redirect the cold air a little bit more. It doesn't do a whole lot there yet, though.
Matt, this is going to be great because it'll be great to see how this verifies, because this is saying what we just talked about, like not going to happen. Not going to happen. There, I don't see any, and none of the major clusters or minor clusters, if you will, show more ridging, kind of poking into British Columbia, poking into West Canada. They say no, the MJO is not going to have a surprise influence. 6-7's dead. That's really interesting. Well, this will be an interesting, and then the other side of it is, hey, the models are still large, under dispersed. They don't capture all these scenarios. Let's see. Let's see how this plays out. This will be an interesting one to look back on.
We do a zoomed in version of North Pacific as well. And, I still wonder if half of the members have a more solid ridge up into Western Alaska. So it's getting pretty close. It's not, like you said, it's not to BC or anything, which is key. But I looked at negative WPO episodes too, and they could still offer some interesting things as well. But this is, on the fence here too.
That's the one, right? And you're right.
That's a killer.
Right. You're fair enough. The WPO is interesting too. But that one that you just showed, I think that's the one that kind of scares you. If you're thinking this pattern's over and it's warm, you see that all of a sudden that vortex now has to split. It has to split. And we're not talking mild air. We're talking brutal, coldest air, air mass across the northern hemisphere. One piece of that has to come down. You got a lot of snow cover, and all of a sudden you can blow up forecasts. Chicago and a lot of places.
It's going to be an interesting late winter game here. That's for sure. Yep. So, so we're gearing up for the last chapter of this exciting end of winter. Anyway, we didn't have a good start, but these are the clusters at the surface, just to give you some ideas. I mean, there's a small percentage of cases that are doing something a little bit more energetic there, but
Well, that 14 is interesting. That's for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, that's Which can we just see that 500 pattern associated, or is that?
I can't do that. I thought I could. Well, I think I can. No, because we can cluster from the northern hemisphere down to the U.S. level, but I can't do it the other way.
Okay, cool.
I want to.
That's interesting, nonetheless.
Yeah.
Great. I know. I guess we're almost out of time, Matt. I don't want to keep it over. This has been fun. So.
It's good talking to you guys. It's definitely been quite a week. It's been a while, so it's been this exciting. So that's been good. So,
thanks for joining us, and thanks for guest hosting. I hope we can do this again, and have a good long weekend. Hopefully, little relaxation, although somehow I doubt you're going to get to it.
I know we're going to be doing some updating, I think.
Right.
I think we are.
You're still going to be getting nudged by certain.
Yep. Everyone's got their positions on.
Hotter.
I know. They got their positions on over the weekend. They're going to be fretting every minute of it. So.
And the long weekends are even worse. It's oh my God. It's like plus 60 or minus 60.
I know. Yeah.
Well, good luck with everything. And
thank you.
we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Take it easy, Michael. Have a good weekend, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, you too.